Tana, Gova Shamanora Chamishim Amah. We're talking about the height of the candelabras that they had in order to light for the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. These huge candelabras, 50 amot tall, like the tree from which they hung Haman, I guess. So, and it says that there were four young Kohanim who would go up on four ladders, and each one, it says, Arba V'yaladim Shel Pirchei Kuhuna. And the four young, and then it goes on to say, "Rabbi Yodim Shapirchei Kuna," four young men of the Kohanim, Ubidehem Kadei Shemen Shel Mea Ve'esrim Log, and carrying pitchers of 120 log, which we figured out was how many gallons? I don't know. 13, 14 gallons. So Yibayalu says the Gemara. They asked the question: Me'av esrim lo kulahu, odiyam l'kolchad v'chad. That would make it a little bit more reasonable. Was it 120 log per person, or for all of them together? Also, all of them together would be more reasonable. It would only be about 40 log per person, maybe about 3-4 gallons, 5 gallons at most. That would be manageable. Tashma coming here. Uviyadehem kadei shemen shel shloshim log. We have a brayta that says that each one only had 30 log. So the 120 was the sum total. Okay, so that makes it manageable. Shem kula me'av esim log, which all combined is 120 log. Tana, we done in the brayta. Ve'hein mishubachim hayu yoter mi nashel mirta. They were more praiseworthy, but it means like stronger here in the specific context than the daughter of Mirta bas Baisos. Amru binashel Mirta bas Baisos. They said about the daughter of Mirta, the daughter of Baisos. Shahaya noto shtei yerechot. Did I say the daughter? I meant the son, excuse me. Ben Shel, excuse me. Yosmi Bina, the son of Mirta bas Baisos. Amru Binashel Mirta bas Baisos said about the son of Mirta, the daughter of Baisos. So, right, the mother, the woman is in the middle here. Shaya noto shtei yerechot shel shor hagadol. He would take to the two thighs of a huge ox. Shalakuach the elef zuz. That would cost 1,000 zuz, so it would be a huge ox, and he'd take two thighs of this huge ox. Umahalich echav b'tzad godel, and he would walk up the ramp to offer them up for like an ola, putting the heel of one foot by the toe up by the big toe of the neck. So he takes tiny little steps. If you're carrying a huge thing, you want to take wider steps so that you have lower center of gravity. You have more stability. He was able to take these two huge thighs of a huge cow and walk tiny little steps up the ramp. Okay. And his brother Kohanim did not let him do that. He thought he was going to be a big shot and show what he could do. And they said, "I'm sorry, you can't do that. Mishum berovam hadras melech. The greater number of people is the greater glory to the king." Because you remember our discussions from Yoma about how you would have you would not have one person taking two thighs. Obviously, that would be unrealistic. So normally they would divide it amongst more Kohanim. But he wanted to show how strong he was. He wanted to do, this enormous amount all by himself. They did not allow it. They demanded that it be divided appropriately. Anyway, so the Gemara says, "My mishubachim." In what way were these Kohanim who took the oil, greater, stronger? Ilim mishum yukra. If it's because the weight of what they carried was heavier than what he carried, that's not true. Hani yikiri tfei, that the thighs of a huge ox are much weightier than whatever 30 log of oil weighs. So Elos, no, the difference is hasam kevesh umeruba velo zakif. There it was a ramp and it was squared, meaning like at an angle, and not perpendicular. Hachas sulamot v'zakif tuva. Here they were ladders and they were very perpendicular. So it might be that it weighed less, but it was actually much more challenging going almost direct vertically up with that weight than it was walking up a lower inclined ramp. Yes, Charlie.
Wasn't Martha bar Baitos the wife of Ben Gamla, the high priest?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
So why didn't it say Ben Gamla's son? That would even be more.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
It says she was the daughter of Baitos, married Yehoshua Ben Gamla.
Yeah, she married Yehoshua Ben Gamla.
Oh, maybe it was daughter from a previous marriage. Maybe she was an almana. Oh no, that couldn't be. Then she would be an almana, and she couldn't be a Kohen Gadol. Maybe it was after the Kohen Gadol died, and she was a marriage that followed.
But Ben Gamla was very late, very, very late, just a few years before the Korban.
I don't know. You got me. It's a good
Okay.
question. Maybe, okay. It's an excellent question. All right. It said in the Mishnah there was no courtyard in Jerusalem that was not lit up from the light of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. So the Gemara obviously, it was on Rabbi, so it was pretty high. Nevertheless, as we said, it does sound like some of this is an exaggeration. Anyway, Tana, we taught in Brisa, top of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. A woman would choose out, would be able to, select grain, wheat, by the light of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. So, you could sift your grain and you could find the tiny little, pieces of chaff that you need to throw away. It was such a good light. All right. Chasidim v'anshe ma'aseh. So it says the righteous person and people of acts of good deeds would. The Mishnah goes on to say, what does it say that they would do? They were the ones that would be juggling they would be the ones that would juggle, that would be dancing and juggling the torches, and saying words of song and praise. Okay, and then it says, and the Levi'im would be playing the musical instruments. Tanu Rabbanan. We taught in Baita. Yesh mim omrim. There were those that would say, Ashrei yildoseinu shelo baishat ziknoseinu. Praised is our youth that it did not give us shame in our old age. So meaning that we were good guys even from when we were young. We were never embarrassed about our deeds of youth. Elu chasidim anshe ma'aseh. Those are the righteous and those of good deeds that were always righteous. The Yeshmin Omrim, and some of the people that would do the dancing would say, Ashrei ziknotenu, praise is our old age, shekapra al yaldutenu, that it atones for our wild youth. And Elu ba'alei tshuva, those are those that have repented, people that had a wilder youth and now are righteous. Elu ve'elu omrim, those and those say, Ashrei mi shelo chata, praise is the one who has never sinned. Umi shechata, and one who has sinned, yashuv yimcholo, should repent and it will be good for him. How exactly that fits with the idea of b'makom shabali tshuva ilmti mein tzadikim gemorim yicholim lamod. But all that being said, it's better never to have sinned. Okay, now Tanya, we turn to Brisa. Amul alav al Hillel hazakin. They said about Hillel the elder. When he would rejoice in the rejoicing of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, Amar Kain, this is what he would say: Imanikan hakol kan. If I'm here, then everyone is here. And if I'm not here, mikan, then who's here? No one. It sounds a little arrogant, but as we'll see in a minute, he seems to be talking in the divine voice, like representing God. By the way, though, if you just pause for a minute and think about the other famous statement of Hillel, right? What's the statement of Hillel that everybody loves to quote? Right? If I'm not for myself, who'll be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what good am I? So that at least is like a balanced statement. That means okay, you have to care about yourself because you're at the end of the day, you're the only one who cares most about you. But you're not only supposed to care about yourself. What good are you if you're self-serving? You're supposed to be there, care about other people. But this doesn't have the balance. This is just like repeating the same thing in a different way. If I'm here, everyone's here, and if I'm not here, then who cares who else is here? That's like just repeating the same thing. So it's going to seem like he's talking here, basically, as I said, in God's voice. If you take a look at Rashi, 3 lines from the top, Imani kan hakol kan, that so he was teaching the masses and like in the name of God, sort of speaking as if God were speaking. As long as I desire this house and my presence dwells in it, its glory will remain. And if I'm here, everybody will come here. But if I depart from and if you sin and my presence depart, mi avokan, who will come here? Meaning, so that's actually important thing. Here everybody is rejoicing, partying, having a great time. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that it's not just wow, this is a great place for everybody to gather. But the point of this place is God's presence. It's actually interesting. I think we mentioned this. Did we mention this yesterday? I think we did. Anyway, the role that a show plays, right? Going way back, always played a double function, right? A Beit Knesset, a place of gathering, and like a sort of a Mikdash Ma'at, a place of representing God's place and of prayer and of worship and so on. So here, where really it is, it's the regel. Everybody's gathering, everybody's partying. You're not even bringing korbanot. So it's sort of like he's saying, hey, this is about God's presence. So if I'm here, then everybody is here. Everybody comes. If I'm not here, it doesn't matter. Mikam, like, what's worth it? Everybody being here. So what matters here is God's presence. Okay, so Huaya Omer. He used to say Huaya Omer Kane. He would say the following: L'makom shani yohev sham raglai malichototi. The place that I love, there my legs will bring me. Okay. Little interesting. So we'll see what that means. It sounds like now he's not talking about God, Raglai, but let's look at the next line. Im tavo el beiti, ani avo el beitecha. If you come to my house, I'll come to your house. We have a play date with me, then we'll have a play date with you. But it's not exactly talking about play dates. Im ata lo tavo el beiti, if you don't come to my house, ani lo avo el beitecha, I won't come to your house. Again, seemingly talking in God's name, not like saying to God, God, if you come to my house, then I'll come visit the Beis HaMikdash. Presumably it's the opposite point. God is speaking and saying, if you come and visit the Beis HaMikdash, then I will also bring my presence into your homes. Shene'emar, as the verse says, B'chol ha'makom asher azkir to me, wherever I cause my name to be mentioned, avo elecha berachticha, I will come and bless you. So I will come and bless you in your own homes if you first come to my house. By the way, that plays nicely into the theme of Sukkot, which is about sort of, the Sukkah is the house, but it's also that intersection, the Sukkah both as being the house and sort of God's presence, Ananei Kavod, the Mikdash metaphors and imagery of the Sukkah, so the bringing together of God's house and being in God's presence in God's house, but then also God's presence in our house. Okay, so you come to my house, you have this rejoicing or whatever, then I will also be present for you in your house. What is this issue about the place where I want to go? Okay, so Rashi says, one minute. Okay. Okay, fine. So it's not exactly clear what that first part about it was. One imagines that it's somewhat related to the idea of aliyah l'regel, right? When it says, right, where was it? Makom shani yohev sham raglai malichototi, that he's probably talking. Otherwise, it just seems irrelevant to the whole point, right? I go where I love, but it's talking presumably the whole idea of where I go and with my regel raglai malichototi. That it's first sort of talking in the voice of the Jewish people that we go, our legs bring us to the place that we love. We love coming here to the Beit HaMikdash, and then God is responding and sort of saying, well, welcome to my house, and if you come to my house, I will therefore come into your houses. Okay, so now he continues. He saw, this is now the one that we know from Pirkei Avot, he saw a certain skull that was floating on the water. Amarla, and he said to it, oh, Horatio, I knew him well. No, I'm sorry. He said to it, Al da'atfach atfuch, because you spilled blood, your blood was spilled. Umatzifayich yitufun, and those that spilled, or that you caused another person, not spilled blood, Rashi says it means that you caused another skull to float. Your skull was made to float, and those that made your skull float, their skulls will float, meaning everybody, there's like justice in the world. Okay, and if this happened to you, it must be that something happened that you deserved it. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, said Rabbi Yochanan, now picking up the what do you call it, the point about my legs bring me to the place that I love. Rabbi Yochanan has a different type of a twist on this. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, said Rabbi Yochanan, Ragloi debar inish, the legs of a person, inun arvin bay, they are his guarantors. La'aser de mitbe'ei taman, the place that he is needed, the mitbe'ei taman movilin yaseh, there they bring him. What does this mean? So not necessarily the place, so we'll see, it means in terms of guarantors and ensuring that the debt is paid back. And what debt is paid back? The debt of your life is paid back to God. So this is basically a way of saying that you wind up going to the place you need to go to in order to die. Hanu tarti kushai, there were two kushim, which Rashi says is like a euphemism, very, whatever, the Gemara had the Gemara's attitude towards kushim tend to be negative, and here Rashi claims that it's using it in order to way saying that they were very beautiful people. But anyway, there is that obvious bias in the Gemara. Anyway, these two kushim, the Havikaimi Kamei Shlomo, which were in front of Shlomo. El Yachref v'Achya b'nei Shesha. Okay, that was their names. It's a verse in Malachim, and they Sofrim de Shlomo. They were Shlomo's scribes. Havu. Yom Echad Chazi leMalach HaMavis Tahavi Ka'atzim. One day he saw the angel of death. Shlomo saw the angel of death, who was very sad. Amalei, Amay Atzivas, why are you so sad? Amalei, this reminds me when growing up, I used to read those stories in the Jewish press, in the center page, what they called? Stories from the Talmud, not something like that. You remember the stories? They always had the Shlomo stories. Shlomo talking to the head demon, and Shlomo talking to the angel of death. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. They always had that. Anyway, okay. So he said, why are you so sad? Amalei, the Kabor Minoi, Hani Tarte Kushai, because I'm being asked to produce these two kushim. I'm supposed to imagine the angel of death there with his, with his scythe, and I have to go ahead and take them back to, take them to the grave. Diyasvi Hachi, and they're sitting here. And I'm sad because I need to get to them, or whatever. So I'll have to be taking their lives. So Shlomo heard this, and he wanted to protect them. So Masrinu L'Seirim, so he gave them over to the Shadim, these Kushim. Shadrinu L'Mechuzah Deluz, and he sent them to the city of Luz. That's a good hideout. That's a safe house. Okay, and in the Gemara in Sota, it says that Luz was a place that nobody died, that the angel of death had no dominion over Luz. So he figures, I'll send them there; they'll be safe. Okay, Luz, when they came to the city of Luz, so Shechivu, they died just at the gates of the city, right before they walked into the city. They just missed getting into the safe city. Okay, so the next day Shlomo saw the angel of death who was laughing. So Amalei, my badichas, why are you laughing? Amalei, or why are you so happy? But also the place where I needed to take them, Taman Shadratinu, that's where you sent them to. Thank you very much. I was given a task not just to take their lives, but to take their lives at the outskirts of Luz, and you helped arrange for it. Thank you very much. Where were we? Miyad patach Shlomo v'amar. Therefore, Shlomo opened up and said, meaning, opened his mouth and said, "Ragloi debar inish." So I bet you didn't know that Shlomo talked Palestinian or whatever, or Babylonian Aramaic. So the legs of a person, inun arvin bay, they are his guarantors. The aser de mitbai taman, the place that he is needed to die. Taman, lat bi mitbai taman movilin yasei. That's where they bring him. Okay. Anyway, that was a digression about the statement about Hillel. But it was, again, interesting in Hillel, this whole idea of coming to God's house and God coming to our house and not losing sight of the presence of the Shekhinah, etc. Okay, Tanya, we turn to Brisa. Amar Lav Reb Shimon Gamliel. They said about Reb Shimon Gamliel, when he would rejoice at the rejoicing of the Beit HaShoeva, Haya notel shmona avukot shel ur. He would take 8 torches of light, or a fire, a flame. V'zorek or is light, ur is flames. I assume means a flame. 8 flaming torches. V'zorek achat v'notel achat. Throw one, catch the next. Ve'ein no godzu b'zu, and they wouldn't touch one another. They'd be in a perfect circle, and he would juggle them without anyone even hitting into the next. And then he did a type of a prostration, hishtachavaya, and it would no'et shnei godolav ba'aretz. He'd put his 2 thumbs on the ground, so not his flat palms, but imagine trying to do a push-up, basically with just your thumbs on the ground, not the flat of your palms. He would put his 2 thumbs on the ground, v'shochev no'sheket haritzpah, and he'd bend down and he would kiss the ground, again, as a flat, like a type of a push-up type of a mode. V'zokeif, and then he'd push himself back up. And nobody else could do this. I see some guys at the gym. I don't know. Maybe I think they might be able to. Anyway, v'zuhi kida, and this is called kida, a type of way of prostration, which is obviously extremely difficult. Levi achvi kida. Levi demonstrated how to do a kida. Kume de Rabbi, in the presence of Rabbi. This was after the Beis Hamikdash, but he was showing what is this thing called a kida. V'itla, and he became lame. He got injured in a serious way as a result. So the Gemara says, "V'ha garmalei." Is that what caused him to become lame? V'amar Rabbi Eliezer didn't Rabbi Eliezer say, "Olam al yatiach adam dvarim klapei mal"? A person should never cast words to heaven, meaning sort of complain to God. Adam gadol yatiach dvarim klapei mal v'itla. There was a great person that cast words against God, and he became lame. Umanu Levi, and that was Levi. So what were the words he cast against God? If you look at Rashi, he quotes the Gemara in Tana, his first wide line. God, you've taken presents up in heaven and you're not paying attention to what's happening to your children. Of course, there goes all the great Hasidic stories, right? All those great Hasidic, who was it? Rabbi Levi Mibarditchev stories, right? Where he would say, where he basically have his complaints to God. What were some of those good ones? He said, God, he says, look, what was it? It says I know we've done all these sins and we've done all these wrong things, but let me tell you what you've done wrong. It would list all the bad things that happened to the Jews. It says, tell you what, why don't we just call it even? So anyway, all right, so Levi did that apparently, and they were not happy with him that he did that, and he became lame. So the Gemara says, isn't that why he became lame? So the Gemara says, wait. So the Gemara says, Havaha Garmule. Yeah, they both contributed. Meaning, okay, so he did something that was deserving of punishment, but then he had to actually go ahead and demonstrate this kida that actually was the proximate cause of him becoming lame. All right. Now that we're talking about Levi having Mitayo coming to Rabbi, Betamni Sakine. So Levi would sort of be would sort of like juggle 8 knives. Literally, it says he would like walk in front of Rabbi. But Rashi says, "Coming to Rabbi bebeito shayanasi umechabdino toli samcho." So this isn't simchas beis hashoeva, but some type of a similar type of a joy now that they did in Rebbe's behalf. It's interesting. Rashi says, "Shayidoig tamid b'tzarat Yisrael b'chol yav." Rabbi asi puranas la'olam. So Rabbi was the one whose job it was to worry about Klal Yisrael. So Levi was somehow tearing him up, and Levi juggled with knives. The same Levi who became lame. I assume this was before he became lame, but he was sort of certainly liked tempting fate or taunting danger. Anyway, betamni sakine 8 knives. Shmuel. Shmuel would juggle with 8 glasses of wine. Is it possible to juggle a glass of wine without it spilling? Has anybody ever?
I have never seen that.
I mean, people can juggle torches, I know, and juggle knives, but I don't just understand the physics of how you could juggle a glass of wine without it. Okay, anyway, Abaye kame deraba with, let's say, betamneya bay, 8 eggs, I assume raw eggs. That's a little bit safer. Okay, so if you want to try to practice some fancy juggling, don't use knives or torches. Eggs will just make a mess. And some would say 4 eggs, so things are getting a little bit more realistic. It's like Yeridas Hadoros. It's basically what it is. It goes from fire to knives to eggs, 8 to 4, so Yeridas Hadoros.
Rabbi, do you keep juggling in the yeshiva?
Yeah, I know. Although I can do a demonstration of juggling afterwards. Tanya. Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, Kishayinu smechim simchas beis shoeva, back to simchas beis shoeva, when we would do that, lo re'inu shina be'einenu, our eyes would not see sleep, we'd be up the whole night. Okay? Ketzad, shari shona tamid shel shachar, the first hour of the day, sunrise, being the morning shachris. Misham l'tfila. Then time for davening. Misham l'korban musaf. Then we go to be present at the korban musaf. Misham l'tfila samusafin. Then daven musaf. Misham l'beis hamedres. Then we would go and we'd spend the afternoon studying. We'd go into the beis hamedrash. Misham l'achila v'shtiya, or the late morning studying. Then we would eat. Misham. It's quite fascinating, by the way. It doesn't say Misham l'sukkah. Because if you're eating and drinking, presumably you're doing it in a sukkah. It is sukkahs, but sukkah isn't getting mentioned here. Okay? Misham l'tfilas mincha. Then it's time to daven mincha. Misham l'tamid shaben hamayim. Then it's time for the afternoon korban. Mikan ve'eloch. And once the afternoon korban was over, and the korbanot of the day was over, l'simchas beis shoeva, we'd start the whole rejoicing of the simchas beis shoeva, which would last till the next morning, and then do the whole thing all over again. So we would never go to sleep, because then we just, we'd go through the night with the simchas beis shoeva. Of course, the Gemara Gemara says, is that really possible? Aini, is this really true? Rabbi Yochanan, Shavua shelo ishan shlosha yamim malkinos of yashen la'altar. If somebody takes an oath that they won't sleep for 7 days, for 3 days even, you give him lashes because it's a false oath. It's an impossible thing to do, to go 3 days without sleeping, and then he can sleep right away because the oath wasn't binding at all. So even 3 days is impossible. And here you're talking about, what, 5-6 days? El hachikamar, lo ta'imnu tam shina. We never really had the taste of sleep, meaning, I got a little nap. You never really got a good geshmak of sleep in. We would sort of like doze off on one another's shoulders, but we never actually got an opportunity to take a real nap while we were at this time. Okay, now, Chameshus Rei Ma'alo 15. I was going to see if I could demonstrate some juggling for you. So demonstrate some juggling in honor of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. I don't know if I can do these. There are different weights. All right, if they were the same weight, I could do it better. Thank you. That's my Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Okay, clearly rabbis have to learn how to do that, as we can see. All right, so there the Gemara continues. All right, so 15 steps. So there were 15 steps, from the Ezra Yisrael to the Ezra Nashim. The Levi'im would stand on that steps. Rashi points out that that's not what they would stand with the Korban, because that's outside of the Azara, but it was corresponding to the 15 Shirei Hamalot, and that's where they would stand. Like it says, you got the band up in front. They're going to be leaving from the front door way over to the east in the Ezra Nashim. This is way over to the west, where the Ezra Nashim goes up into Ezra Yisrael. Okay, so Rav Chiza said to one of the rabbis, that was arranging the Agadata in his presence, meaning that was, laying it, sort of like quoting, traditional statements of Agadata to be expounded upon. Where were we? Shmi lecha hani chamisha esrei malos keneged me. Amram David, have you heard that these 15 shirei hama'alot, what do they correspond to? Okay, because here's somebody who really knows Agadata, and he's got a whole storehouse of Agadata. Like this was the Bar Ilan before there was a Bar Ilan. Some of these people had memorized all this stuff. So he said to him, "Have you heard a good explanation about what those 15 Shirei Hamalos correspond to?" So Amrle, he said to him, "Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan." This is what Rabbi Yochanan says: "B'shas shekara David Shitin." When remember the old the Shitin, those underground caverns, and there were 3 opinions. One said that they were a natural formation. One said that they were dug, and the third explanation, and there weren't underground caverns. It was just a hollow in the Beit HaMikdash that was where the wine went after it was poured on the altar. But according to the assumption that there were these caverns and that they were dug, here the Gemara is saying that they were dug by David. Okay, so here's what happens. Very famous Gemara. When David dug the Shitin, Kafa Tahoma, he dug a little too deep. And he broke through to the underground depths of water, and they were now coming through the hole that he had dug. And Ubay Mishtafa Alma wanted to float the world. He put his shovel a little bit too deep, and all the water is now coming out from way deep down, and now it's going to completely flood the world. Amar David Chameshes Rei Ma'alot. David said the 15 songs of ascent, V'horidan, and brought them back, the water back down to its place. So he said back, if that's true, Chameshes Rei Ma'alot, the 15 Shirei Ma'alot, songs of ascent, your dotni ba'aleh. It should be the 15 songs of descent. You should be bringing them down, not bringing them up. So Amar Lei, he said back to him, the person who knew the Agadata, Hovi Kartan, you made me remember something. Hachi Itmar. Here's the way it was said. That's a good point. I knew I got it wrong. B'shar shekari David Shisin, when David dug the Shisin, Kafa Tahoma, so the underground depths, floated up, burst forth. Ubay lemishtafal alma, and it was about to flood the world. Amar David said, Mika diyada ishari lemichtav shem. Is there anybody who knows whether it's permissible to write the divine name achaspa on a piece of pottery, v'nishadi b'tahoma, and we'll throw it into the depths, umanach, and it'll stay there. So actually, this was like when, what was it, BP, right? They punctured through, and the whole thing was, how do you get down there with all the oil, pouring out and recover the hole? So this is what they were trying to do. They should have checked this Gemara. The Gemara had the answer. Well, all you have to do is you write God's name on a piece of pottery, and you throw it down, and it'll find its way to the hole and stop stop up the hole, and that solves the problem. So, of course, it's funny that they say on pottery, right? Because pottery floats. You maybe say a rock or something. Anyway, so Rashi says, is that true? Pottery sinks? Pottery sinks?
Yeah, it's heavier than water.
Pottery is heavier than
Yeah.
water? Okay. All right, fine.
Well,
So,
there's a
I
note-
guess
there's
it's
a note here that it was a special shard.
special shard.
With it.
That was,
This, you want
yeah,
the
go,
explanation?
what, it just says it was a special shard that was weighty?
No, it's, it says, he suggested using an earthenware shard because earthenware sinks, so that the shard would sink down to the opening of the deep, where the divine name was written on it.
Right. So what Rashi says
Well,
is,
no, that's Rashi, but then there's more.
Yeah, but-
Furthermore, the shard that David was referring to was not simply any shard. Rather, when excavating the pits, David discovered a shard on which it was written that it was in place since the 6 days of
yeah,
creation.
that's Rashi.
By removing this shard, David allowed the waters to escape.
Right.
And as I said, David wished to...
That's why I need another shard.
Was returned to its place.
Right. So that's what Rashi says. Rashi says it wasn't just he dug too deep. I should have mentioned Rashi. It was, they were digging and they said, oh, what's this piece of pottery here that has God's name? Let's take a look. And they lifted it up and then, okay, so now they knew in order to close it and back down or whatever. I don't know if the original piece of pottery had God's name, but it was there, to close it up. You needed another piece of pottery now to throw down and to close it up. Okay, so is it allowed though? Because it's God's name, it'll lead to the wearing out of God's name. Maybe it's indirect, mechikas Hashem. Is it allowed? Umanach leket dekamer le'midi. Nobody had an answer for him. Amar David. It's a little funny here because he got a little like pikuach nefesh type of thing going on. So David said, "Kol yada l'meimer ve'eno omer yechanek bigrono." Anybody who knows what something to say and isn't saying it, let him be, let him be strangled in his throat. So Nasa Achitofel kal v'chomer v'atzmo. So Achitofel made a kal v'chomer. He said, "Umal lasus shalom bein ish leishta." When it comes to making peace between husband and wife, Amar Torah Shmisha Nichta B'Kedusha Yimachal Amayim. My name that was written with sanctity should be scraped into the water to see if the woman is a sota. So Lasos Shalom Kol Olam Kulo, to make peace in the entire world. Allah Kama V'Kama, how much more so should it be justified? Amar Lei. So he said to him, "Shari, it's permissible." He didn't give him the whole argument. You're in the middle of a little crisis. Just give me the answer. Okay, it's permissible. So Kosuv Shem. By the way, what's also fascinating though is that it was only because of like this threat that forced Achitofel to think I don't know anything. If you don't tell me something, all right, wait. Okay, yeah, it's okay. So sometimes we need a little external stimulus to help get our mind moving. Anyway, of course, the fact that the whole world was about to be flooded wasn't enough of a stimulus. I don't know. Anyway, it's permissible.
He did a quick calculation before.
Right.
God
So
said he
okay.
wasn't going to...
God wasn't. We were about to. Anyway, it wasn't by rain. I don't know. Anyway, because of Shem Achas, but he wrote a name on the divine on a shard. V'shadi l'toma. He threw it into the depths. V'nochis tahoma, and the depths went back down. Shitzer alfei garmidi, but it went down very, very far. It went down 16 amot. So kichazi denochis tuva. Now when he saw that it went so far down, so Amar, he said, "Kama de midli tfei mirtav." The higher up the depths are, closer to the surface, the more moist the earth is. The more so it's better for the world. Mirtav alma, the world. Amar chamesh me asrei malos. He said the 15 songs of ascent. The aske chamisar alfei garmidi, and it caused it to become back up 15 out of the 16 amos. I'm sorry, it's 1,000, not just, no, I'm sorry, I said amot, 1,000 amot. It went down 15,000 amot, 16,000, alfei garmidi, 1,000 amot. He said the 15 songs of ascent, and it came back up 15,000 amot. The ugmei ba'alfei garmidi, and he had kept it 1,000 amot away from the crust of the earth because you don't want it to be too close because then you're going to get a flood concern. So he brought it up close enough that it should be good for the ground. Amar Ula said Ula, Shmamina sumcha da'ara alfei garmidi. We see that the depths of the earth is 1,000 amot till you hit the Tahom, because now that's where the Tahom now is, right? So there's obviously clearly what you have here is it's opposed to a molten core. You've got the understanding of a liquid core. Okay, so you've got your tahom in the middle, which is your liquid core, right, which is ready to burst forth, and then you have the crust of the earth. So David went down, it's going to all flood, filled it back up, okay? So then the point was, though, that it went too far down, and then he brought it back. So now that he brought it back from 16,000 amos to 1,000, he says you see that the crust of the earth is 1,000 amos, right? Because that's now where the home rests underneath the earth. Okay, so Shema Mina Sumcha Da'ara Alfei Garmidi. So the Gemara says V'haka Chazina Decharinan Porsa V'nafki Maya, but we see that we dig a lot less than 1,000 amot, and water comes out. There are wells, we can dig down and get water out of wells, and not 1,000 amot. So the Gemara says, Amar Masharshia hu misuma depras. That's from like the type of underground channels or arteries that come from the Euphrates, but the actual tahom, like the actual core of the tahom, is 1,000 amot. Okay, Rashi explains what the suma depras is. Malot aisuya kimechilot shebehen mei prat olim tachas hakarka. So it's like type of veins in the ground that the waters of pras get close to the top of the earth. Because the pras is very high. So all rivers are below prat. In terms of height from sea level, I guess. And waters that come from a high mountain, if there's like veins for it to go through, will go up to a similar height. So you can dig, you can dig in areas and you'll get water from underground veins that carry the water from these rivers, but this is not the waters of the Tahom. The waters of the Tahom are 1,000 amos below. Yes?
The Prat is definitely identified as Euphrates.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Why?
Okay, I was just wondering because it's not obvious.
Yeah. Well, the letters certainly, and the Har Gadol who Prat, and the huge river. What huge river in the in the ancient world was Euphrates. So anyway, I mean that was a whole fertile crescent.
It might have been the Nile. That was a big river.
No, but it was clear that it came from the east, like of Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Anyway, so the Gemara says like. By Rabbi, okay, the Amdu Kohanim b'Shar Ha'elyon Sheyored, and the Kohanim were at the opening of the gate that at the top of the steps, which would lead into the Ezrat Yisrael, but they were at the top, and then they started a procession down the steps through the Ezrat Nashim and out the front door, and they did it with their Tkiya Trua Tkiyas, blowing of the trumpet bass. So by Rabbi Yirmiyah asked, Lamala Asirit Nochis Chamisha V'Kai Asasara, when it says they went to the 10th step and they did the blast. 10th counting from which direction? Okay, is it the 10th step from the bottom? They had gone down 5 steps from the top. Or does it mean that they went down 10 steps and they were 5 steps off from the top? Teku. Well, that's one question we will never know the answer to. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught. So now this is, you remember how they turned around right before they left and they said, we're not like our forefathers who would turn their backs to this place. We are only to God and would worship the sun. We are to God and to God is our eyes. So the verse says, this is a verse in Yechezkel, Pneihem Kedma, referring to this sin, that their faces of the people at the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, where their faces were to the east. Obviously their backs are to the Heichal, right? Because the Heichal is to the west. So what does it say? Ella ma Talmud lomar achrei Heichal Hashem. So why did the verse say their face is to the east and their back is to the Heichal, is to God's house? Melamed shayu poin atzmanu matrizin klapi mata. It doesn't just mean their backs. It means their achor. It means their rear ends. And that what they would do is they would uncover themselves, expose their rear ends, and they would defecate in the presence, towards God's house. So they would completely not just worship Avodah Zarah, but do acts of disgrace and defiance, towards God's house. And Anuliya, but that's our forefathers. We're redeeming on it. Look at what we're doing. Anuliya, we are to God Liya Einenu. Aini, is that really true? That you should not say like Shema Yisrael twice. It's like saying Modim twice. It suggests a dualism. So how if you say Anu Liya Uliya Einenu, you're saying God's name like twice in a row. So it sounds like a type of a dualist concern. So this is what they say. Anu Hema Mishtachavim Kedma. They would bow down to the east. V'Anu Liya. And we bow down to God. ve'einenu, and then they would put a word between the first word of God and the next one. And our eyes, liyamalachalos, are sort of long for God. So they add another word in between because the Gemara does not like the idea that you have two names of God in juxtaposition. It sounds like a type of a concern of dualism. And again, I just repeat the point I made before. It's quite interesting, all of this dialogue that is going on, right? It says when they did the Arava thing, they would say, Yofi l'cha mizbeach, Yofi l'cha mizbeach. Here they're making, before they leave, they're saying, look how good we are, as opposed to what our forefathers were. And, we just had Hillel. Hillel is actually the other side of the dialogue. Hillel is embodying God, as it were, and speaking for God and say, oh, thank you for coming to my house. I'll come to your house. As long as I'm here, everybody is here. So it's fascinating, this whole idea of dialogue that's going on in the context of the Beis HaMikdash. When do you ever have this before? So something about this idea of Succah and God's presence in our house that somehow is suggesting this much more intimate type of a relationship and this actual dialogue. Quite fascinating. Okay, Mishnah. Now that we mentioned the tekiyot that the Kohanim do, we go on to tekiyot, the general issue of tekiyot in the Beit HaMikdash. You have no fewer than 21 tekiyas, blasts of the chatzotzrot in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? So every time they would do a tekiah, it would be tekiah trua tekiah. So really it means 7 sets of tekiyot, okay? Because each unit would consist of a tekiah trua tekiah. So there's no fewer than 21, i.e. 7. The ein mosifin al arba'im u'shmona, and there'll be no greater than 48, which is i.e. 16. Now, how do you get this? B'chol yom v'yom hayusham esrim v'achat tekiyot. And every day you would have the base would be 21, 7 sets. But mikdash. Shalosh l'ptichat sha'arim, 3 when they opened up the gates and they opened up for business. V'teisha l'tamid shel shachar, 9 as they were bringing the morning tamid. Meaning, so I'm just going to divide by 3 because it's easier to think what it would be. It'd be 1 when they opened up the gates, 3 sets when they would do the tamid. Now, when is it when they would do the tamid? If you take a look at Rashi, Teisha l'tamid shel shachar, Rashi says, Keshayu menaschines nischei hatamid, when they would pour the wine libation. Then we learned before that that's when the Levi'im would sing and do the musical instruments. HaLevi'im omrim shir, v'shalosh prakim hayu b'shir, and there were 3 breaks in the song. Shayu mafsikim bo v'tokim hakohanim b'chatzotzrot u'mishtachavim ha'am. Okay, so that's quite fascinating, the choreography there. The Levi'im would play the musical instruments, but the chatzotzrot were for the kohanim. So in the middle of the singing and the music and all that beautiful thing during the pouring of the wine, you'd have a break, you'd have tekiyah, you have the blowing of trumpets, and then the people would actually go ahead and bow down. So it would be a way of getting like more, participation. It wouldn't all just be a spectator sport. Like some people love chazanas. For me, it turns davening into a spectator sport, right? So here you get both. You get like the beautiful whatever, but then you break and everybody, bows down, and you have the blast, and it's a little more participatory. Okay? Now. So you would have 3 of that during the Tamid Shel Shachar. So now we're up to 4 sets. V'teisha l'tamid shel bein arba'im. Similarly, you do the same thing for the afternoon Tamid. So now we're up to that's your full. So that's 3 more sets. So you're up to 7. That's your total 7 sets. So that's your 21. Okay, so that's your standard 21. U'b'musafim hayu mosifim o teisha. And if you had a musaf, then you would do, because you would have another 9, because you do also the wine libations at the musaf and the song of the Levi'im at the musaf. So that would be anytime you would have that whole singing along with the korbanot, which would be by these obligatory korbanot. You would have the musical instruments, and you'd have the breaks by the chatzotzrot. Okay. So normally you get basically when you do the wine libations that come with the communal obligatory korbanot, you have the singing and the musical instruments, and with the singing and the musical instruments, you get these breaks in it by the blowing of the trumpets with the bowing down. So a normal day, there's 1 for the opening of the gates, 3 and 3 is for the Tamid of Shachar, Tamid Shel Bein Arba'im, and by a time when there's a musaf, there's another 3 with the musaf. Okay, yes.
In Jerusalem, on Erev Shabbos, they blow the
Siren.
So I wonder.
Well, let's keep on listening. You're good anticipation. Okay.
You said
Erev Shabbat, so now we're up to, in a normal, like, Yontiv, you would have 24, okay? Not 24. You'd have 3, 3, 3, 9, 10. You'd have 30, okay? Erev Shabbat, is my dividing by 3 confusing for you? Because to me it's helpful. Okay.
We can multiply by 3.
Well, no, but it's easier for me to think about the different
Sets,
moments,
yeah.
Sets. Okay. So, Erev Shabbat, hayu mosifim sheish. 6 more, meaning what? Why? Meaning 2 more sets. Shalosh lihavtil ta'amim mimlacha. So as David was saying, you do 3 to say it's about to be sunset, so you'd have the blasts, and presumably there would probably be like they would do with the torches. One person lights a torch, from that distant mountains. So if they're blowing the blast in the Beis Hamikdash, there's some relay system that blast gets communicated throughout the city. Okay, so to let people know it's about to be Shabbos, they would do 1. B'shalosh and another 3 or another set. Lahavdil ben kodesh l'chol, when it was not just like 40 minutes before, but when it was 2 minutes before, to indicate that it's about to be Shabbos. Okay, interesting use of the phrase lahavdia when you're going from Chol into Kodesh, but it's the same point, to make that separation. Okay. Erev Shabbat Shabbato Chag. So now, if let's say you had the combination of these 2 circumstances, it was Erev Shabbat and it was in the middle of Sukkot. So Hayusham Arba'im v'Shmona, that's when you could get your full 48, 16 sets. Let's figure it out. Sholosh l'ptichat sha'arim, 1 for the 3, i.e. 1 set for the opening of the gates. Sholosh l'shar ha'elyon, v'sholosh l'shar ha'techton. Because you would also have now, not just for the opening of the gates in the first thing in the morning, you would also have it for when you're going and the whole procession of walking out to draw the water. So you would do 1 set when they were at the upper gate, 1 set when they were at the lower gate, right? So here they are, right? Here's the Ezrat Yisrael. Here are your steps. Oh, you're trying to draw fast, it comes out even worse. Okay. Here's your Ezrat Nashim. So, right, and the Kohanim started here with the trumpets. Here's the upper gate. Anyway, the Levim were standing here. They walked down, they did a procession. Then they blew it again here. And they walked, this is Shar HaElyon, right, Shar HaTachton. They're now going out of the Beis HaMikdash. Then they go wherever they go to draw the water. And now as they're going to draw the water, right, as they're going to draw the water, they do another set of shofar blasts. Okay, so they do a whole procession. Okay, so shalosh l'shar yom, shalosh l'shar tachton, shalosh l'min lo hamayim. 3 when they drew the water, shalosh ha'gabe mizbeach, and 3 when they poured the water, accompanying the actual pouring of the water. Teisha l'tamid shel shachar, v'teisha l'tamid shel ben arbayim, v'teisha l'musafim, and then you have the tamids, the 3 sets by 9, 3 sets by tamid shel shachar, tamid shel ben arbayim, and the musaf, and shalosh plus 1 plus. If it's also erev Shabbos, then you have 3 more lahaftil ta'amin amlocha, to warn people to stop doing malacha, and v'shalosh and 3 when it's about to be Shabbos lahavdil ben kodesh l'chol, to distinguish. So let's see if we count that in terms of individual units. Okay, we got 1 unit when we open up the gates, 1 here when they start the procession. So 3 here, start the procession, go out the door, do the filling, so that's 4. Then they're going to do 1 unit when they pour the water, that's 5. Okay, then they're going to do 3 units of the 3 different korbanot, Tamid Shel Shachar, Musaf, Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim, that's 9, that's 14. And then because it's Erev Shabbat, they're going to do 1 to warn the people to stop doing Malacha, 1 when it's actually about to be Shabbat, that's 16, 16 times 3 is 48. There you go. Yeah. Now, of course, what's interesting is, you know what it doesn't mention? It doesn't mention the Tekiah, the Trua Tekiah that it says that they did when they did the Arava. Right? It says they did Tekiah, Trua Tekiah when they did the Arava, didn't it? That's what I remembered. So, I don't know. That was in the... anyway, we can go check. I'm pretty sure it said that. Mitzvah Arava Ketzad. Yeah. And it says after they stuck it by the side of the altar, Tiku v'hiriu v'tiku. So, if Hoshana Rabbah fell out on this day of Erev Shabbos, that would get you... I don't know why. You could get 3 more. Okay. Anyway, okay. Okay, so now the Gemara says the following: Masnisin, the low Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. At the time we taught in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hapoches lo yivchos mi sheva, v'hamosif lo yosif al sheish esrei. So he says that there's a minimum of 7 and a maximum of 16, so he did the counting the way I was doing it because it makes it easier.
Yeah.
The units, counting a unit as 1, not as 3. But the Gemara understands that it's not just a counting, it's not just a label, there's actually a real difference between them. But my kamiflagi, what's the debate? Rabbi Yehuda savar tkiya trua tkiya achasi, that's 1 unit. Rabbanan savar tkiya l'chud v'trua l'chud, that they're separate units. Okay, now the real issue here could be a question of whether you take a breath between the tkiya trua tkiya or not. Meaning, not just are you going to, out of convenience, count it 1 or count it 3, but how many real distinct sounds are you going to make? Separate sounds are you going to make? My time is Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason of Yehuda? Amarkra utkatem tru'ah. And then there's a question on the side. It says, Alma truah v'tkiya achasi. If he uses the verb, blow a truah, but the verb is tkiya, you see that it's 1 unit, that it has to all be 1 unit. Rabbanan and the rabbis would say, no, it's telling you a tkiya precedes a truah, but it's not telling you it's 1 unit. Okay, so Rabbanan, my Tamai, where do the rabbis get an idea that they're distinct units? So the Torah allows for a phenomenon of a tkiya independent of a trua. So you see it exists as an independent sound. The if you think it's basically 1 sound, so I mean not 1 sound like it's the same sound throughout, but there's no break between the sounds. So how could the Torah say do a half of a note and not a full note? So if it's a 1 unit, 1 sound, with uninterrupted sound, how would the Torah say do the first half of it? Obviously, it's distinct, and even when you do tkiya trua tkiya, you have a break between the sounds. Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda would say, yeah, the Torah could say half a sound. That's just as a way of getting people's attention, right? To gather people together. So it's not a halachically like a unit, a sound unit. It's a half a sound, fine, but we can do a half sounds. That doesn't bother me. For Rabbanan, Simanu, so fine. We're doing it as a way of getting people's attention. But Rachmana Shavya mitzvah. But the Torah said, fine. But this is the way you get people's attention. Is you do this sound. So that means that this sound has some independent standing. Okay. So again, it's clear according to the emphasis the Gemara puts, it's not just a question of numbering. It's a question about do you take breaks between them, do you make it into, or is it conceptually 1 sound, or is it conceptually distinct sounds? So let's just end it with this last line. Kaman Azla Hadam Rav Kahana, who is going like the statement of Rav Kahana, Ein bein tkiya l'trua v'lo klum. You don't take any, there's absolutely no pause between a tkiya and a trua. Kaman to Rabbi Yehuda. That's going like Rabbi Yehuda, because that's exactly his point, that it's all 1 sound. Pshita, said the Gemara, obviously. No, I might have thought a fil k'Rabbanan. Maybe it goes like the rabbis. Ulafuke mid Rabbi Yochanan, and it's coming to reject Rabbi Yochanan, and doesn't mean that there's no pause between them. What it means is what they're trying to say is something different. They're trying to reject Rabbi Yochanan. The Amar Shamatei Shetkiyos Patei Shishos B'Yom Yatza. He says on Rosh Hashanah, if you hear the 9 tkiyot, right? Because minimally we know if we knew what a trua was, you would be enough to have 3 sets of tkiya trua tkiya, and if you were at each one at a different hour, you'd be yotzei. So obviously that's like a big, it's one thing to say you have to do it as tkiya trua tkiya without a break at all. It's another thing to say, no, you have a break, but not only do you have a break, but you can actually hear them an hour apart from one another. So maybe when it says don't break between tkiya trua, it's not saying like Rabbi Yehuda that you do it literally without a break. What it's trying to say is you can't have a huge break between them. So kamash malan. So therefore we're telling you no. This statement of no interruption is Rabbi Yehuda's statement. It's not the way the rabbis would argue and say you don't need that. You're not allowed to have a huge break. So the Gemara says, no, maybe that was a good point. Maybe that is what they're saying. Maybe they're saying, don't have a huge break between them. But maybe it's not saying you can't have any break. No, the Gemara says, im kain mai v'lo klum. So no, then it would just say, don't break. But it says, don't break v'lo klum. There can be no break, not even the tiniest break. So you see that is the Rabbi Yehuda position. So there are 3 logical positions. Rabbi Yehuda says it's all basically halachically 1 sound, and you don't even pause between tkiya and trua and tkiya. You have the rabbis that say they're distinct sounds, and you have a break, a moment's pause between them, but maybe still they have to be in tight juxtaposition. Exactly how tight is not clear. And then you have the statement of Yochanan that takes it to an extreme. It says if they're distinct sounds, sounds, they don't even have to be a group of sounds. They could be 9 at 9 different days, at 9 different hours. So it's basically, is it one sound? Is it 3 sounds but a grouping, and they would have to be tightly juxtaposed? Or is it mamish distinct sounds and could be over, many hours of the day? Okay, and we finished the daf.